Why are we learning how to use a PRDS form? We learn how to use it because over here in the Bay Area, there are certain regions where zip forms are not welcome. There's a certain elite group of realtors that decide that they have a more superior form that realtors should use if you go into their territory. Now, the PRDS forms are forms that are generally used by some realtors in the peninsula. And that goes all the way from, I would say from San Mateo all the way down to Sunnyvale, okay? So if you transact in this area, you have to know how to use PRDS form. PRDS form is not available for free to everyone. I know the zip forms are available for free if you are a NAR member and also a CAR member. If I go into zip form, I probably will not find the PRDS form. And I'll show you what's available on zip form, okay? Okay, we got Rita Liao joining us. Thank you, Rita. And I go to form. And this is what's in your library. Now, what's in my library may be different from what's in your library, okay? Now, we don't have any PRDS form. So if you ask, well, you know, if I transact in the peninsula and I need to use PRDS form, where do I go to get PRDS form? You can actually pay for it. And you can also get it for free if you're a member of Silver. But if you're a member of Bay East, I'm not sure if you can get it for free, okay? I don't know anybody from Bay East that have tried using PRDS form? Never, right? Okay. Jennifer Chai is joining us. And I'll show you where the PRDS forms are at. This is Silver, okay? Now, if you don't have access to the PRDS form, you can always talk to somebody that is with Silver. We do have several agents that are with Silver, and you should all have free PRDS forms, okay? Now, if you want a blank PRDS form, you can get it from me. I have the blank one downloaded. But the PRDS form, honestly, if you have it in PDF format, you can actually import it into zip form and set up e-sign from there, even for PRDS form. You don't have to use the e-sign within PRDS because then you have to learn something new, okay? And it's a lot of work. So if all you want to do is to download, or they have a lot of different forms on PRDS, okay? That's simply one of them. The RPA is one of them, okay? Now, because I think you're going to be using the RPA more, they call it the real estate purchase contract, okay? Today we're going to study this one, which is the real estate purchase contract. This is the one that we're going to study today. And it is very different from zip form in terms of the requirements. Very, very different. Over here in the peninsula, the practice is actually quite different. Okay. If you are used to zip form, you're used to certain conditions, but their conditions are quite different in PRDS. I'll show you a few examples afterwards. Okay. Now let's go ahead now. I just log into my Silva because I am a member of Silva, so I have access to PRDS forms. Okay, if you need any PRDS forms, I could probably download for you if you want. Okay, there are certain forms that are in PRDS that are very helpful. For example, the San Jose, San Jose, the street tree disclosure thing. And then you have the San Mateo, Santa Clara Counties Advisory, which is only used in the peninsula. Okay, and there should be a form concerning San Jose's street tree compliance. All right, here, City of San Jose street tree disclosure form. That is unique to San Jose. So if you do transaction in San Jose, there's a special disclosure form that you have to do. Okay, just as if you have to do, yes. What report? 3R report? San Jose requires 3R report? Oh yeah, Daly City. No, the 3R report, now somebody was talking about 3R report. If you ever do transaction in San Francisco or in Daly City, all the way down to Daly City, San Francisco all the way down to Daly City, they have such a thing called the 3R report. The 3R report is kind of like a point of sale ordinance. If you don't know what a point of sale ordinance is, point of sale, it's called point of sale. That is the ordinance that require every sale to go through the city's inspection. Okay, it's called point of sale. Not every city has a point of sale ordinance. Say, for example, in San Francisco, for sure, they have the point of sale. Okay, in Sunnyvale, we don't have the point of sale. In a few cities in Southern California, they have point of sale where the city actually will send out somebody to do inspection to make sure that you don't have any violation or you don't have anything that is not constructed with permit before they let you close escrow. And this is called the point of sale. Okay, I got Jesse Du joining us and Grace Gong joining us. So the city of San Jose Street tree disclosure form, it is just a disclosure form. It really does not require any inspection. If you ever sell a home in San Jose, you have to fill out this disclosure form. So every city have their own little requirements. So if you are not familiar with a particular city, if you're selling something for the first time or you're listing a property for the first time in a particular city, it's a good idea to check with the local practices to make sure that if you need to get certain reports like the 3R reports in Daly City or 3R reports in San Francisco, you get those ahead of time. Because sometimes when the buyer's agent wants to submit an offer, before they submit the offer, they might ask for the 3R report, and if you don't have it, that's no good, right? So, okay, just a few extra things that you need to pay attention to. There are so many different forms under PRDS. I mean, imagine if there's a local agent that requires you to use a PRDS form, and then you don't have access to PRDS form. You don't know, who to turn to. Now you know who to turn to. You can either turn to me or one of the agents who is a member of Silva, and they would have access to all the PRDS forms. There's one other thing we can do is maybe to save this as PDFs and save it in, and then keep it in the agent's folder so you can access it in case you need to use any PRDS forms. Okay. The purchase contract is actually quite different from the zip form, as you can see in a minute. All right, let's go ahead and bring up the purchase contract. when you are required by the local listing agent. Okay? San Mateo County. Yeah, San Mateo County, and mainly San Mateo County. I don't know in Santa Clara they do that, but you know, yeah. San Francisco have their own forms. Okay. Let's go ahead and pull out that PRDS form. Okay. Now this is the real estate purchase contract. Okay. It's called the PRDS form. The agency confirmation is the same as zip form. And the deposit, it's the same, okay? Because by default it's by electronic transfer. These days we always go with electronic transfer. No additional deposit, but that will be the same as the zip form, okay? Let me point out a few important provisions here that makes it different from the zip form. For example, on number H, where it says buyer's loan obligations. Now, typically on a zip form, you know, the buyer starts the loan application, and if the buyer does not get the loan approval, the buyer can cancel it. Okay? Can the buyer, is the buyer obligated to tell the seller what is it that caused the buyer not to get the loan approved? Typically, I don't tell them if I use zip form. If I want to cancel based on loan contingency, if I use zip form, I basically tell them I'm canceling based on loan contingency. That's it. Do I need to say, well, it turns out that he did not make enough income, or it turns out that his down payment wasn't good enough, or it turns out that the appraisal was below the market price, and he doesn't have enough money to cover for the difference? Do I have to state that in my cancellation if you use zip form? You are not required to, because the contract does not require it. So when I get a cancellation based on loan contingency, I simply state in the cancellation the paragraph number that I rely on, whatever the paragraph number is, without stating any specifics or details on the cancellation. I usually don't tell them unless the other side actually call and ask me. Now, what if the other side actually calls you and asks you, well, you said you're canceling based on loan contingency. May I ask, what is it about the loan what caused the loan not to be approved? May I ask that? And how do you respond to that? And you have to respond to it because you have a realtor asking you. Certainly, if your buyer tells you, don't give them the specifics, then you can tell the other agent and say, I'm sorry, I don't have authority to tell you. My buyer does not give me permission to tell you the specifics. Now, if your buyer asks you not to tell the other side, specifically why his loan did not get approved, you have to advise your buyer. If you don't allow me to tell them, then they get very suspicious. Then they're going to think that, well, the real reason has nothing to do with loan contingency. You got to give some good explanation why you didn't get the loan. Okay? Now, if you tell lies, are they able to find out the true reason? Yeah, they may be able to, because they will call up the loan officer. They will call up the loan agent. What's wrong with the loan? Now, if the loan agent says, there's nothing wrong with the loan, it was approved, then what? You just told a lie, right? Now, if you are the agent representing the buyer, and you knew the reason why this buyer is not buying, you actually have to be, if they ask the right question. Now, remember, I represent the buyer. I also have to respect my buyers not wanting the other side to find out the reason. But on the other hand, I'm also have to worry about my colleague, the other real estate agent. And if they call me and ask me a specific question for which I have an answer, if my buyer told me not to say it, then I have to be honest with the other agent and say my buyer would not allow me to tell you. Okay? Because you don't want to tell lies to your fellow agent. So if the buyer say, you know what, I want you to keep it confidential, you have to tell your buyer, you know, if I don't disclose it, then they're going to speculate. They're going to think that, hey, you know what, you don't have a good reason for canceling. They're going to call up the loan officer and ask the loan officer the truth. And then the truth is going to come out that your loan was approved. You simply don't like something, or you simply no longer wants to proceed with the purchase anymore for some personal reason, right? And that personal reason is going to come out. But on the other hand, you also represent your buyer. If you can get away with not saying something, and if it helps your buyer, don't say it. But if you can't get away from it, you have to say it. Then you just have to say it, unless your buyer tells you don't say it. Then you tell the other agent, I can't tell you because my buyer would not give me permission. All right? Now, say for example, when you sign a cancellation of contract, it could be due to any contingencies. It could be due to an appraisal contingency, a loan contingency, or even an inspection contingency. Now, you have, let's say assuming you have all three contingencies available to you, and your buyer said, I don't want to buy anymore. And you ask your buyer, why, what's wrong? Earlier you liked the house so much, now you say you don't want to buy it anymore, right? The buyer may say, you know, my wife come and look at it, she doesn't like it anymore. Now, a buyer could like a property initially, and later decided that they don't like it anymore. Now, what contingency can I use? I can't use loan contingency, and I can't use appraisal contingency. Just about the only one that I might possibly use is the inspection contingency. Now, some of you might think that inspection contingency has to deal with the house itself. Not necessarily. Inspection contingency includes the surroundings. Okay? It includes the surrounding. Inspection contingency can include things as feng shui. Yeah, you bring the feng shui master over and say, bad feng shui. That's right. Bad feng shui, therefore we're not buying anymore. That is a legitimate reason. You know how many times I use feng shui as a reason? Quite often. Especially when my buyer can't think of a good reason, we always try to use feng shui. Okay?
You know, like those, you know, there's like spiritual people.
Yeah.
They said they have a different vibe. Would that be considered as well?
That's right.
Okay.
Physicalness and, you know, the impact on that buyer, you know, the inspection contingency is actually broader than what you think it is. It's actually more than just the conditions of the property. It includes the surroundings, okay, and just the overall feng shui of the property. That could be a proper reason for canceling, all right? However, every time when you cancel, it has to be done in good faith. Okay, what does it mean to cancel something in good faith? it means that you have a legitimate ground. Okay? Now, sometimes, you know, when a buyer wants to cancel, remember, you represent the buyer. You want to protect the buyer. Although you are not happy that he's canceling, but he's still your buyer. Okay? Remember, if you don't help him this time, maybe next time he won't ask you to be his agent. Right? But you tell your buyer, don't do this too often. Because if you do it again, I may not be able to help you. Okay? So you remind them, when you decide to buy a house, you got to cancel in good faith. Now, what if you have a buyer that has seen the property, right? And then he's already in contract. In the meantime, he continues to look at other properties. Should you allow him? Should you say, oh, it's okay, you know, we're in contract on this one, but we continue to look at other properties? What should you tell your buyer? I think the best thing to do will be, when you first meet the buyer, tell certain things up front so they don't do certain things to you. When you meet your buyer, just say, you know what, buying a property is a serious business. If you place an offer and if it's accepted, you have to cancel. If you cancel, it has to be based on any of the proper grounds for you to cancel. Now, once you have submitted an offer, okay, and you want to continue to look some more, I mean, how do you tell your buyer? You've already submitted an offer. Don't look at another house again until this one, you decided you no longer like this one. Now, he likes this one. That's why he placed an offer, right? And then he continues to look at other properties. Frankly, that's very, very difficult. I always tell my buyer, once you decide to like this house, you focus on this house. Don't look at other properties, unless it turns out that, you know, there's something wrong with this house. Okay, you can exercise based on contingency. All right, going back to the PRDS form. Now, we're talking about buyer's loan obligations, right? Now, if you read it, it says, if buyer intends to obtain any type of financing, buyer shall secure a lender's or mortgage broker's letter stating that, based upon the review of buyer's application and credit report, buyer is pre-approved for the loans identified in this contract. That letter is delivered with this contract, or buyer shall, within 5 days of acceptance, deliver that letter to seller. So here, they actually allows you to not submit your pre-approval immediately. It allows you to 5 days to submit your pre-approval, but this really doesn't work around here in the Bay Area. If you don't have pre-approval, they might not even look at your offer. Okay? So make sure you get your pre-approval when you submit your offer. Okay? All right, that's just buyer's loan obligations. Now let's look at the financing contingency. Okay? Now, if a time frame is entered in paragraph 8A, but paragraph 8A is below, we'll look at it afterwards. This contract is contingent upon buyers obtaining written lender's commitments or the loan amount and the financing terms specified in paragraphs 2D, 2E, and 2F. Buyer's right to exercise the financing contingency to cancel this contract is dependent upon buyers making a timely, good faith application for the actual loan specified in paragraphs 2D, 2E, and 2F. What that means is, if you have a loan contingency, you did not even start the loan application process, and then if you state on the cancellation of contract, the reason for cancellation is loan contingency, that is cancellation in bad faith. And if the seller finds out about it, they can sue you to keep the deposit. So certainly it's important to at least get the loan application started. And then it says lender commitments are based on criteria which may include but are not limited to value and condition of the property. If a written lender commitment as specified herein cannot be obtained, buyer has a right to cancel this contract. Buyer may attempt to obtain substitute financing. However, buyer may not use buyer's inability to obtain substitute financing as an excuse to not perform buyer's obligations specified in this contract. Buyer should not remove the financing contingency without first personally verifying all the terms and conditions of the loan directly with the buyer's lender. What that means is you cannot what do you call that? You know, before you remove your loan contingency, you have to make sure that you check with the lender on the terms and conditions before you remove it. Because if you remove it and then you realize that you cannot meet one of the terms, then it's too late, because you can't go back to the seller and say, well, I'm sorry, I missed it the first time, but you already removed the loan contingency. Okay? And then just like car, it also has an appraisal contingency. Okay? If you read this sentence, it says, in exercising this contingency right, buyer shall rely on appraisal from an independent licensed or certified appraiser. If a time frame also entered in paragraph 8A, however, buyer shall rely solely on the appraisal obtained by buyer's lender. What that means is, if the purchase price is $800,000 and the lender's appraiser came back with an appraised value of $800,000, but if you hire your own appraiser, it came back to be $780,000, you cannot cancel based on appraisal contingency, because you're supposed to rely on the lender's appraiser's appraisal report, not a second appraisal report. Because if you rely on a second appraisal report, that's not allowed by the contract. This is pretty standard, so I'm just going to skip. Now, this is where you enter all the contingency period. If you leave something blank, it means there's no contingency. Okay, so in this sense, the PRDS form is quite different from the zip form. The zip form, you have to, usually there is contingency unless you check no contingency for appraisal. Okay, now for loan it's very easy. For loan, if you check all cash offer, obviously then there's no loan contingency. But on the other hand, even if you have loan contingency, for loan, typically we put whenever there's no loan contingency. Now, can you select no loan contingency even if you have loan? Yes, you can. You just take a chance, right? Now, how comfortable should you be if your buyers decide to not have loan contingency if the buyer has a loan? Well, it really depends on how strong the borrower is. Sometimes you have a very strong borrower, you might want to consider waiving the loan contingency, right? Because in the Bay Area, sometimes you really need to think about not having too many contingencies. Okay. Now, okay, so for A, if you leave it blank, it means there's no loan contingency. If you have a number, that means that there is a contingency, and the number indicates the number of days, okay, to remove the contingency.
After those days, automatically means remove, automatically means not remove.
That's right. Is it an active removal? or passive removal on PRDS form. We will see it later, okay, as we go down further. But notice that PRDS form has such a thing called a lead-based paint contingency. I'm sure you guys have never seen lead-based paint contingency in zip form, but PRDS has it. Why do you need a lead-based paint contingency? In a typical purchase, will a buyer do a lead-based paint inspection? You almost never hear a buyer doing a lead-based paint inspection. I mean, before 1978, if you do a lead-based paint inspection, probably you're going to find lead in the paint, right? I think it's just a matter of taking precaution if you have kids in the family. Now, what kind of precautions can you take if you have lead-based paint? You have to do dust control every time you remodel the home. You change the window frame, for example. You break the pane. You have to do dust control so that we're not breathing the air particle. Because if you have lead-based paint, right, and you'll be doing remodeling at home, and you're still, now, if you have a pre-1978 house, when you're doing remodeling, it's probably not a good idea to stay in the house, because especially when you have kids, right, kids may have lead poisoning. Kids can get lead poisoning through breathing, or just to picking up dust on the floor and put it in the mouth, okay? So not a good idea if you have remodeling at pre-1978. And you probably want to hire a contractor that are familiar with doing this type of preparation, right? They know how to handle lead-based paint. There are contractors who have special training for that, okay? Something for you to keep in mind. You know, there are two contingencies that don't appear on especially the lead-based paint contingency. We don't see that on zip form. What about title contingency? Do you see on zip form? Actually, you do. Yeah, you do see it on zip form. It's in one of the paragraphs. So a buyer receiving a preliminary title report can look at the title and say, oh, I don't like the title, okay, and cancel. And in fact, the title contingency, I believe is part of the inspection contingency. You can consider as part of the inspection contingency on the zip form. It could be many things. CC&R. You read the CC&R, it doesn't allow rental. And you're trying to buy a property for rental, right? And you read the CC&R, it doesn't allow second story to be built, and you want to build second story. That will be title though. That will be under title though, right? That's right. So you got title contingency and lead-based paint here. So if you leave it blank, now if you leave it blank, it means that you don't have title contingency. If you are a selling agent, as between physical inspection and title contingency, which one are you more likely to waive? Depends. Title contingency is more of a serious matter. It's harder to correct. If the CC&R does not allow rental, which doesn't happen, by the way. Maybe the first year it doesn't allow rental, but after the first year, usually they allow rental. Well, what if you can't build a second story and you waive title contingency, right? You waive title contingency. Can you use your physical property condition to cancel? I suppose you can argue that, okay? It's a stretch, but you can argue that. So I think in that sense, I think a PRDS form is actually more sensible. It has a title contingency because sometimes you may want to cancel based on title. Certain things about the title that does not allow you to do certain things, you can still cancel. Okay. Otherwise, if you use a zip form, the title contingency is actually lumped together with the property condition. Okay? All right. They can't hear you, so I'm not going to answer that. Okay? This is quite typical. It's just a zip form, so I'm not going to go over it. Okay? And the booklet thing is the same. Earlier, I talked about the San Mateo, Santa Clara counties advisory. So if you use a PRDS form, you probably need to provide this advisory to the buyer. Okay, the San Mateo, Santa Clara county. So actually, the PRDS form is actually used in the San Mateo and Santa Clara counties. Okay. But there are still real estate agents that just ignore the PRDS form. Like me, if I do a transaction in San Jose or Sunnyvale, I totally ignore PRDS form because many agents don't have access to PRDS. However, you may have certain local agents that insist on you using PRDS form. If you don't use it, I don't know what they'll do with their zip form offer. Okay. Now, this one here is called the Termite Inspection Contingency. Let me ask you this. Do you have Termite Inspection Contingency in the zip form? No, you don't have a special Termite Inspection Contingency in the zip form. But it is under the general physical inspection contingency. Okay? And then on the invasive and destructive testing, they say here, neither the buyer nor anyone acting on buyer's behalf shall be authorized to undertake any invasive or destructive testing without securing prior written approval from the seller. So you cannot do any kind of destructive testing. What are the typical destructive testing that you might see on a residential purchase? Most of the time there isn't any. However, if your property is on a hillside and if you need to hire a soils engineer to prepare a soils report, the soils engineer needs to dig holes into the ground, and that is invasive testing. So you need the seller's permission for that. I have bought a piece of vacant land in, well, I have a client in San Jose. It's on a hillside. So we did a full-blown geological report. So we have to dig several holes and dig several trenches. So we need the seller's permission. Okay. All right. Lead-based paint, this contingency, we talked about that. As-is probation. Now let's talk about 18. Now, you know, in residential purchase, sometimes a listing agent will write as-is. Does as-is means that the seller makes no repairs? As-is means that, well, in California, all purchases are as-is anyway. But when an agent puts down the as-is, they usually mean that we're not making any repairs. Okay? Now, even when a property is sold as-is, all that means is the seller is not obligated to make any repairs. Does that mean that the buyer is not allowed to do inspection? No, the buyer is still allowed to do inspection. Okay. So, yeah, this one contains the termite report, whereas the zip form doesn't have the termite report. Okay, condition. $20 is rather unique to a PRDS. Let's talk about 20. Seller's obligation to repair or correct it says unless this contract includes the as-is provision, seller shall make repairs or corrections set forth in this paragraph. So that makes it very different from zip form. If you do not check as is, seller may have to make certain repairs. Okay? So that is unique. So if you don't want the seller to make repairs, make sure you remember to check the as-is provision. Seller's repair or correction obligation shall be limited to deficiencies known by seller or discovered before close of escrow. Disclosure of defects and deficiency made by seller in the disclosure documents or elsewhere do not relieve seller of any agreed upon or statutorily required repair obligations. What are the types of repairs that the seller are required to make? Mainly the point of sale type of repairs where it's required by the CD ordinance. Otherwise, generally, the sellers are not required to make repairs on an as-is sale. Okay? Now, it says here, subject to any risk of loss, seller shall deliver the property at close of escrow in the following condition. Roof skylights, not including gutters, shall be free of leaks. Now, this is different from as-is, right? So if you forgot to check as-is, your seller may have to repair roof leaks. Built-in appliances, plumbing, heating, air conditioning, electrical, solar, landscaping, sprinkler, sewer, septic, and pool spa systems, if any, okay, shall be operable. And operable shall mean that the appliance or system meets its basic intended function but may not operate as if new or may not satisfy current building codes. Okay. A plumbing system, shower pans, and shower enclosure shall be free of leaks. Chimneys and fireplaces, including dampers, shall be operative and free of structural defects. All broken or cracked glass shall be replaced by seller. So if you are not familiar with PRDS, and if you make an offer and you forgot to check as is, right? Or if you represent the seller, and if the selling agent who represents the buyer leaves out the as is provision unchecked, then your seller may be on the hook for these repairs. That is very important to know, right? Because this is very different from zip form. And if the buyer's agent intentionally leave out the as is provision, and you as a listing agent forgot to check that or require the as is provision to be included, your seller might be on the hook for all the repairs in paragraph 20. And he's going to be very mad at you. Okay? Awfully mad. 20. As is up there, paragraph 18. You see that? You go to paragraph 18 and mark it, right? Yeah, you mark this one. If you're the listing agent, you should mark this one, right? Or else your seller might be on the hook for all the repairs in paragraph 20, right? So be careful. If you decide, if you have to use PRDS form, pay attention to this, okay? All right. There's something else about PRDS form you're glad that you know, okay? I'll show it to you afterwards. Contingency removal, contractual obligation, cancellation rights. And this one is active removal, just like zip form. It's not passive removal. It is active removal, okay? Just like zip form. And then the notice to perform, it's actually quite similar to zip form anyway. Because if you look at the notice to perform, right, it says shall have 2 days to either remove the designated contingency or to perform the designated contractual obligation or cancel this contract. Okay. And request for repair, just like this form, you can request for repairs. Okay. Seller's obligation to maintain property during escrow, that is like zip form. It's really not different from zip form. Okay. Walkthrough inspection, like zip form as well. And then you got the home protection plan. You know, on the zip form, what do you call that? The home protection plan? Home warranty. Whereas on the PRDS, they call it the home protection form. Now, on that zip form, on the home warranty, you only have a few check marks. Whereas on the PRDS form, look at the number of check marks you have. Buyer or seller or waive such plan shall be at a cost of not exceed whatever amount and shall be paid for by either buyer-seller or buyer-seller 50-50. So you have more choices on the PRDS, right? And then the option shall be selected by the party ordering the plan. An option shall include premium upgrades, refrigerator, washer, dryer, pool, spa, air conditioning. It has a little bit more options than what you have on zip form. Okay, let's see here. Legal nature of this contract. These are just the standard languages, okay? Assignment, attorney's fees. So, Megan's law, standard just like zip form, okay? Capacity of parties and authority to act. This one we cover it through zip form on a separate form, but this is actually included in here. This is standard, just like zip form. Yeah, this one, the designation of buyer's capacity. In zip form, we have a separate form for that, but in PRDS is actually included in the purchase contract, all right? The buyer's capacity, like for example, when your buyer is a trust or corporation or LLC, in zip form, a separate form, but in PRDS, the same form. Also included in here is a broker's fee. Now, broker's fee, you can actually indicate if it's per MLS or it's by a separate commission agreement. So this is not something that you'll find in, I don't think you'll find in zip form where they talk about the agent's commission. You don't find that, do you? No. Zip form, we assume it is per MLS, whereas PRDS, it can either be per MLS or it can be by a separate agreement. It's by a separate agreement, you check this box. Okay. Seller's capacity, okay, and that. I was going to try to look for something that I thought is kind of interesting and important, but I kind of lost it. I want to go back there and show you where it's at regarding repairs, okay? Now, must the repair be done by a licensed contractor? A while back, I saw on the PRDS purchase contract, the repair must be done by a licensed contractor. Whereas on the zip form, there is no such requirement, correct? Got it? Remember on the zip form, you can have a handyman do the repairs. Whereas on the PRDS, you need a licensed contractor, okay? Seller's obligation to make repairs. Somehow this one doesn't say that it's to be by a licensed contractor, okay? I know previously, in the previous version of the PRDS form, it actually requires a licensed contractor. I might have missed it, but I'm pretty sure previously I saw one that required a licensed contractor to be the repair person. All right, that's it for PRDS contract today. So if you ever need one, you know who you can get it from, and that'll be me. Okay. But then any one of your fellow agents who has membership with Silver can also access the PRDS form.